I have another client to show you guys. This is from a consult, and my client came very well prepared. His name is Daniel, super cool guy, really knew what he wanted out of the call, and that was really great. And the one thing that I think is so important about this is that he had a ducted system and decided to go ductless. And that's where a lot of this stuff then gets rooted in his issues that he has later. Let me show you.
My idea behind this, Corbett, was I made a little PowerPoint presentation to kind of show you
Oh,
kind of
great.
some details about my house and then the questions I have, if that works. So just a few details about the home. Kind of the big question I have today, Corbett, is originally the house had central air and it was installed in the crawl space and they had floor vents. Each
Mhm.
room had a supply and return.
Mhm.
And also the kitchen and the living space had the same. And then there's one register in each bathroom. I'm not quite sure if it was return or supply.
And those are now blocked off.
Yeah, those so they're all blocked off. I yanked out the whole system and now the HVAC system or the whole, the air conditioning system is just a ductless mini split system with three air handlers. One thing I was always curious about is those gable vents on the side. I didn't really know too much about it. So I was kind of curious about your thoughts on that too. But this is how it looks like, just all sides.
Hmm.
And this is the footprint. And we have the front porch right here, the back deck, and then these little red squares is where we have the air handlers at the moment. As far as the sizing, I believe there's a larger unit in the living room. I think it's 18,000 BTU, and then the bedrooms have 9,000 BTU each. As far as the air conditioning itself, the units do well. They can heat and cool pretty well. But after a while, I started noticing that there's just little to no ventilation. If I close all the windows and stuff, there's just no ventilation. There's just nothing. So
Hmm.
air quality gets pretty poor. I started measuring VOCs and CO2, and if I leave it closed and don't air it out and stuff like that, it can go to 1200 parts per million and increase and just keep going. I've seen it to where the VOCs are like, when I'm pushing air around with like a ventilation fan, I'm not sure why, but it goes up to like 2200 parts per
Hmm.
million. So it's pretty bad. And then after I started watching your videos and stuff, I started realizing how important it is to have ventilation and fresh air. And also during hot season, humidity gets very high. Cold season, humidity is low, which is a little bit easier to handle than high humidity. But that's kind of how it is. And then I'm concerned for potential for mold in some
Hmm.
spots during hot season. Also curious about ventilation and humidity control for the crawl space and attic. So I have the living space, but then I also have, crawl space and attic as well.
Both of those are vented to outside right now.
Yeah, the attic has the gable vents, I don't think it has a ridge vent last time I looked. And then below the crawl space has vents on
Okay.
the walls there. So the current strategy, to deal with the poor air quality and humidity issues is, I open the windows, have some window fans. There's also ceiling fans. And then when it's high humidity, I just use a dehumidifier. There's one that I picked up that's rated for 4,500 square feet. I just put it in the center of the home. So I have a few air purifiers I put in each room. I just let those run. When I clean the filters,
Hmm.
they seem like they pick up a lot. So I
Okay.
use those. So we want to improve the air quality. I want to improve the ventilation. I want to be able to manage the humidity. And then also curious on insulating attic and crawl space and how to prevent mold. First question after all that, Corbett, I know was a lot. What should I do in my scenario? Because I don't have the central system anymore, the ducted system. What should I do for ventilation and dehumidification?
Okay. So first off, do you have carpets anywhere in the house?
It's all hardwood floor, and then we put some rugs down. There's one rug in the living room.
Okay. Does that get dirty pretty fast, or you guys are pretty good about vacuuming?
Vacuum often, and I would say maybe it doesn't get that dirty. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Uh, the dust in the filters, I think, is probably directly related to how you're ventilating the place. But I would say that even when you're not ventilating it, the fact that the CO2 is climbing, the VOC is climbing when you close up the house, I think makes sense because it's an older home and probably it's had a lot of VOCs introduced to it, spiked over the years. Is there a kitchen exhaust system in it?
There's no hood. There's no range
Okay.
hood or anything.
Okay, so that alone probably could soak all the materials in the house with VOCs that then it turns into a battery. So then like every time you turn off the ventilation, whatever it is that you're doing, those things start battery streaming. They start charging the house air with the VOCs. So that could explain that easily.
Okay.
But secondarily, you have a one-story house with all of the top and all of the bottom exposed to spaces that are probably not the air quality that you want. So it's possible that also, even if you weren't opening up the windows in a city like Decatur, you've got traffic, you've got dust from that, you've got compounds from that, and particles that are being created from all those chemicals too. So I think that probably the dust from outside and also the dust from crawl space and attic are leading me to, I think you mentioned blower door testing. I would recommend doing that,
Okay.
just so that you can know like how intense the opportunity is in the attic and in the crawl space.
Okay.
Since there's no ductwork down there, is it easy to crawl around in the crawl space?
It's pretty tight access down there.
Okay. Your HVAC guy got down there
Yeah.
and crawled around. Okay. So have you done any air sealing in the attic or in the crawl space?
No ceiling. So
Okay.
I wanted to wait until doing something like that, like a blower door test, and then
Yeah.
it, I would do blower door test in combination with a thermal camera, correct? Or what's a good way to?
Yeah. Zonal pressure testing and infrared and pressure panning, because where the air is coming from is probably a big part. Like if you have a certain amount of air leakage already, and then we introduce more ventilation on top of that, and the ventilation that we introduce is according to ASHRAE 62.2, which we'll go and calculate in a minute here, it's going to be something like 50 CFM tops. And if you're already getting 100, for example, I'm just making up numbers right now,
Uh,
then it would kind of be a drop in the bucket for us to bring this air in, filter it, put it through a heat exchanger and an ERV, do all the like bells and whistles. It would make some difference in some things, but it wouldn't solve all things. So when you're trying to attack the system, I think that first testing the system would be a good idea, and then trying to go in the order of air sealing, insulation, mechanical upgrades,
okay.
I think would be a better approach.
Okay.
Okay, I am going to show you exactly what I ended up recommending for Daniel, but first let's just go through the rest of these questions real quick because they are going to lead to the same answer. What should I use for ventilation dehumidification in my house? We're on our way to getting there. That will be included in what I show you. Should I consider changing back to a ducted central air system? What I'm going to show you demonstrates why the mini splits by themselves, or even, God forbid, mini splits plus something really crazy like a Zender ERV. If you spent all your money on those two things, no matter how high performance your home is, that's like not going to do the trick either, because you've got 5 factors of ventilation, which we're going to get into in a second here. Can I get away with keeping the existing mini split system if I add a mechanical ventilation system? Again, that's what we're going to actually try to get to, because for him to have disassembled and completely removed an existing duct system, brought in ductless mini splits, and then turned right around, ripped those back out a year later, put in a duct system in the only place we've got access to, which is still the crawl space. Like, it's a crawl space is better than an attic. A vented crawl space is better than a vented attic, and a conditioned crawl space is better than a conditioned attic. I have a video about that if you want to see. So yes, the first 3 questions here are all kind of about the solution that we're about to drive to. The last thing here is testing, which is what we were just talking about. How to test air quality and composition of the air. And how can I test for mold and find sources of mold if they exist? That is an easy one, and I'll quickly just show you this. This is called Home Air Check. This was called Prism Analytical, was the chemistry lab that we worked with for a while. I've got videos with the main chemist over there, Alice, when we were analyzing our home as we were building it, the one that I'm recording from right now. This thing is great. They have this package right here, which is $500. You get surface dust. You get VOCs, which include mold VOCs in this package, and formaldehyde as well. That's like 3 separate little vials plus a surface dust collection thing. And you might want to get a couple of them if you were going to do, like, honestly, $1,000 for what it would cost for you to get a mold room, inspector is like, you're getting a lot more with this. So anyway, that's what I'd recommend as far as the testing of the air in a 1-point test sense. That's an easy win. Okay, so let's go over here and take a look at this. I'm just going to lay the whole thing on you at once. This is what we're looking at. This is a terrible drawing by someone who is 45 years old who is pretending to be a 3-year-old, I guess. Sometimes it's hard to like come up with a way to format this stuff that it makes sense to both me and to my clients. But basically what we need to do is we've got these 3 red conditioning devices. He's got 3 tons of air conditioning and heating in here, which is probably too much, but it is what it is. Let's try and like make the situation better rather than start fresh, because you just can't do that every single time. What we need to do is do the 5 factors of ventilation. So we've got circulation. We do not have circulation between rooms with this ductless mini split system. And we don't have circulation within rooms like the laundry bath or the kitchen, because we don't have mini splits in there. That's the only fans that are at work right now, aside from his ceiling fans, which I don't know. I assume there's not one in either of the bathrooms, and probably not one in the kitchen. We need to do capture and filtration. We don't have the kitchen exhaust hood yet. We need that. So that's not drawn into this, but we need to add one right here, or maybe that's what this thing is right here. Actually, that's a door. I apologize. So we need to capture the pollutants in the bathrooms with bath fans, and in the kitchen with a kitchen exhaust hood. That's kind of no-brainer. We don't know whether we need to add makeup air to the kitchen hood without doing a blower door test, which is why I was just talking about blower door testing. That's very important. We need to do filtration with that. Mini splits don't have good filters in them. They're see-through. They're not going to grab skin flakes. They're not going to grab even medium-sized pieces of dust. They're just for like really big stuff. We need to do humidity control and really circulate this air, because this dehumidifier that he's got sitting right here, right now, that's a good spot for it, to his credit. But we don't have any way for that air to get into the bedrooms, for example. So the bedrooms are going to become more and more humidified as people are in them. And then they won't, like this machine can't reach in there, basically. So we need to give this machine an ability to reach everywhere in the house. That's that circulation piece again. We've got dilution air, which is something that he was asking about, the ventilation solution. And also pressure relief, which again, I'm gonna wait until we've got blower door data on this to say anything more about. So what we've got here is either we can stick with the dehu here, or we can put a dehu down in the crawl space. And we can play around with this. You need to have a dehumidifier. Like most people need a dehumidifier. And then we're also going to add an ERV. This, in this instance, is a Panasonic Spot ERV. I have a video on how to do surgery on the former version of this. It's called a Whisper Comfort ERV. It's about $500, maybe 600, I think, at the time of recording here. So it's the cheapest ERV that you can get. And that includes the little spot ERVs that you put through the walls, like the Lunas, for example. And it will do the trick because it's got the kind of capacity that he needs in this house, something roughly on the order of 50 CFM. And what we need to do is have these 2 pieces of equipment be in the way of an airflow current that's going from one end of the house to the other. So what we want to generally do is think about rooms being either negatively pressurized or positively pressurized. Bathrooms, we want to be negatively pressurized. We want a fan in each of these bathrooms that's going to take air out. We don't want the odors from the bathrooms or the humidity from the bathrooms being pushed into other rooms in the house. So those are always the sinks. That's where we're pulling air out of the house with these bath fans. So we're not going to pressurize these rooms. What we generally want to do is pressurize the bedrooms, because we know that people are going to spend 8 hours at least in an ideal world, and I have 3 little kids, so I know that that's not realistic all the time, in these bedrooms. That's a long time for you to just be sitting in there and just soaking in the air around you. So let's make the air in those bedrooms the purest air that we possibly can. That's where we're going to introduce this filtered air. So what we've got here is a fan. The fan is how we're going to circulate the air, but what it's connected to is a ductwork. The ductwork is going to have a supply trunk that's going to have little boops and boop and a boop for the living room, bedroom, right? So that's where all the air is being pushed into. And I'll talk about this fan in a minute. And then we want to pull air out of the other end of the house. And I normally wouldn't recommend putting a return in a kitchen, although since the purpose of this system is just a filter, this filter right here is the one that I'm always recommending, which is the Aprilaire 26 2516, which is a 31 inch by 28 inch. Like, it's the biggest filter you can get. That's going to do a couple things for you. It's going to lower your static pressure, and it's going to be like once a year replacement on this filter. The filter itself costs about 150 bucks. So that's as little maintenance as you could possibly get on this thing. So we can pull out of here. Hopefully the oven and all that stuff with its own dedicated exhaust is on this side of the kitchen, and that would be nice. So we can pull out of the kitchen. We're going to put it through a filter, potentially through a dehumidifier, and then through this fan. This fan is going to be one that is dialable. And the one that I'm generally thinking of is going to be, I like this company right here because this stuff is so cheap that it's pretty crazy. So these things start at 80 bucks, 70 bucks. The biggest one that I was looking at was a 10-inch duct. And this thing runs, let's see, 1200 CFM. That is way too much. What we need to do is figure out what the 1 air cycle per hour rate is and kind of aim for that so that every hour we've got the air passing by that dehumidifier by the ERV so that we can do that. That's volume divide by 60. So this would be an outlandishly big fan. For another reason, by the way, when we look at this map, you can see that we're going to be delivering, like, we're thinking an 8-inch, a 6-inch, and a 6-inch. 6-inch is about 28 square inches. We'll call it 25 square inches. So 25 square inches, 25 square inches, and then 50 square inches. So we've got basically a 1, 1, 2, 4 parts, 2 parts of the air being delivered into the living room, 1 part being delivered into each of the bedrooms. We can't deliver more than 75 CFM into each of these bedrooms. If we do that, then we can't get the air back out under the undercut on a door. A 3-foot door with a 1-inch undercut, according to Manual D, which is the ductwork design manual, can pass up to 75 CFM. So if we've got 3-foot doors, great. If we don't, if we have 2 8 doors, that can pass like 67 CFM. So we're gonna need to limit that. So that means that basically we've got something like 75, that's 150, plus another 150 over here is about 300. We wouldn't wanna do much more than that. And you wanted to make sure that you can dial it down too. So if we didn't need the full 300 CFM, which is likely going to be around his 1 air cycle per hour rate, then we don't have to do that because maybe he found that just 1 window open in one end of the house, 1 window open in the other end of the house with 1 fan does plenty, and maybe that's only 75 CFM. So a quarter of what 300 CFM fan can deliver. That would be fine. What we're going to need to do then is shop for, in this setup, something that can deliver that. So if we were something like a 6-inch fan, let's just see, that should be somewhere around 300. Yeah, it can do 400. So let's do this one. We're not going to want to duct this with 6-inch though. We're going to want to upsize the ductwork so that we can get it to be as quiet as possible and so that we can get it to have as little resistance as possible. So that's why I'm upsizing it to what I'm talking about here with the 8-inch and the 6-inch. This thing should be as big as possible, this return, because you just want it to be going slow. This would be loud if it's tighter. This will have a harder time if this is tighter also. Also, the dehumidifier being in line here introduces a special issue that I'll get into later. But basically, this is going to then induce this cycle of air past the ERV in the dehumidifier and back into the kitchen, and then we just basically have this loop like a little, like a lazy river at a water park, right? So it's just constantly going around and around. And that would solve the circulation problem. It would solve his filtration problem. It would solve his distribution of the dehumidification and the humidification as the season requires. And it would also fix his distribution of the ERV problem. So we don't have to get an ERV that's an expensive one, 1,500 bucks, duct it like crazy. The ERV itself would be located in the crawl space, which is a non-conditioned space. Like you just want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So this scenario, I think, was the simplest version of getting at all of Daniel's issues that he was having with his home, giving him all 4 out of the 5 of the factors of ventilation, the last one being pressure relief, which we're not handling in this video because we don't have a blower door test yet. Okay, so here's the technical problem that I'm going to leave you with. We're trying to pastiche multiple pieces of equipment together that have very different airflows. This dehumidifier blows about 240 CFM max. Um, I think it's more like maybe even 200. The fan that I just picked for you can do, it's got an 8-inch collar on it, but it can blow 600 or 700 CFM. So those are very different characteristics, and I would say that you'd want to think about that before you actually build this thing as excellently as I've drawn it here. The DHue is going to cost you like 1,500 bucks probably, and the Panasonic ERV has an ERV core, so it's going to cut down half the humidity automatically, passively, without you doing anything. It's going to cut down half the temperature gain automatically. The DHue is not going to do either of those things, so it's going to work it a lot harder, and it's a much more expensive piece of equipment. And it's got the heating and cooling elements in it. So I would say like trying to not use the DHue as much as possible would be my recommendation. I've already replaced the dehumidifier in my house once in 3 years. Thanks again to Daniel for letting me share his story. You guys, if you want to learn more about this, I've got courses on ventilation design and on HVAC testing and HVAC design. You can end up being one of my clients as well. If you need help like this, feel free to comment below if you have something else to add that could have made this solution better. Like, subscribe, tune in next time.